Today, I want to talk to you about one of the best wintertime fishing setups, rigs, whatever you want to call it, and that is the Ned Rig. First things first, if you do like these videos, please, by all means, I highly encourage you to like, share, and subscribe, as it really does help out in this channel, and also spread that message out there so that way other people can see it. Now, next, I want to talk about why the Ned Rig works so well. If you didn't know, the Ned Rig is a small finesse style hook with a jig head attached to it, and what it's made to do is mimic a bait fish on the bottom of the lake floor, just kind of going after some food, and it presents in very easy target for these lethargic winter bass. If you didn't know, bass metabolism in the wintertime slows down because of their cold-blooded nature, and because of that, they're not going to want to exert energy to chase things all over the place. Rather, they are just going to get that low-hanging fruit, easy meal. And this is what the Ned Rig is supposed to do, present that easy meal. Next, let's talk about the equipment that you are going to need, or at least, honestly, I'm one of those people where you can kind of use anything, but let's go over what preferably you should have if you want to start throwing the Ned Rig. When it comes to the rod, you want a medium to medium light spinning rod. Typically, most people would like a 6'6" or 7-foot style rod with a fast to super fast action tip. Me personally, I fish from a kayak, so normally I go with a smaller size rod. I don't think rod size is necessarily as important as it is the action of that rod and the sensitivity of the tip. And I'm going to keep emphasizing sensitivity in this video. There's a reason for that, and we're going to jump into that here in a second. But when it comes to the reel now, you want to have, like I said, a spinning rod. So you're going to have a spinning reel set up with a smooth drag system. For the line, I like a 6 to 10 pound fluorocarbon. That fluorocarbon, once again, because of the sensitivity, harping on that sensitivity here. That's why I typically like to go with this. I don't like using monofilament or braid or anything like that. Sometimes people will use braid with a fluorocarbon leader, and that's typically fine. That all depends on the type of lake that you're fishing. Is it full of a bunch of wood or weeds, or is it a smooth rocky surface? It's going to be kind of dependent on that, but normally, just to make things easy, I always go with a 6 to 10 pound fluorocarbon. As for the bait itself, like I said in the introduction of the video, it is a small finesse hook with a jig head, typically 1/16 to 1/8 ounce, and you can find them on Amazon for real cheap. I mean, recently I just bought a pack of 25 for $15, and you are going to want to put a small soft plastic, emphasize once again on the word small, a small soft plastic on that hook. My personal favorite that I like to use, and no, I'm not sponsored or anything like that, is going to be the Z-Man Finesse TRD. Now, the reason why I like these so much when it comes to the Ned Rig is simply because, number one, look at it. Look at this small size. I mean, this is got to be around 3 inches or so. Very small, once again, mimicking that bait fish kind of bobbing up and down on the bottom of the lake there. And I love these different colors depending on your situation. Typically, this will work better in a clearer lake than a murkier lake, forewarning there. And I like these because simply they are super, super stretchy, as you can see. They're very tough. They're very durable, which is great for those cold winter lake conditions. Another reason why I love these Z-Mans is because they float. If I were to throw this into a lake right now, you would see that this thing would be floating on the surface, which is key. Once again, the whole point of having that jig head on the Ned Rig is so that way the bait is kind of just facing up like this. And then when you're pulling it on your line, it'll go up and back down and up and back down and up and back down. You get the point. Now, why was I stressing sensitivity so much during the equipment section? And the reason why is because, as we said earlier, wintertime bass are slow, they're lethargic, they're not going to move around a lot. And when typically you are going to get a strike, either number one, you're going to miss it, not feel it, not be able to set that hook, or number two, that fish has just grabbed onto that bait, it grabbed onto that hook, and it's just going to sit there with it. I can't tell you how many times, especially when I first started winter fishing, and I was not paying attention to my rod, not paying attention to my line, and all of a sudden I go to reel in because I didn't think I got anything, and I have a fish on there, and now the poor thing is gullet hooked, and I got to go ahead and get my pliers out, get the hook out in a way that doesn't injure the fish. It's wintertime. It's not good for them to be out of the water like that for so long with the varying temperature changes, things of that nature. It just turns into a bad mess. If you ever had a gullet hook bass and you're not going to keep it and eat it, you know what a mess that can be. Like I said, a lot of these lethargic winter bass will simply suck up that bait, sit there, swallow it, and you'll never know it's on if you're not paying attention to the line. That's why having that fast action tip, having that 6 to 10 pound fluorocarbon line, and looking, and I didn't talk about this much yet, but looking at your line, looking at the subtle movements, that's why it's going to be so important. Otherwise, you're going to miss a strike, or you're going to have to get a lot of hooks out of gullets. Typically in wintertime, bass will usually congregate together, they'll group up together, and they'll go to places where in the water, normally deeper, where the temperature is going to be roughly the same all winter long. They don't want those crazy swifts and swings inside the temperature that you can get in winter months, especially if you live in certain northern or maybe Great Plains states, things of that nature. They're going to be congregating up. They're going to be grouping around structures such as standing trees in the water, ledges, drop-offs, and rock piles. This is another reason why if you are going to go winter fishing and use the Ned Rig, go to a place where you know that bass are at. I'm in the military, so I move around a lot. And if I move, normally I do move during the winter time, I'm not going to go to a lake that I've never fished before. I typically go to places where I know people have fished before and have caught fish. Now, if this is a go-to lake of yours, you know there's bass in there, then go to that lake, use that lake. You should have success in the wintertime there. But what I don't want you to do is get discouraged if you get skunked, because I can't tell you how many times wintertime fishing I have been skunked. I go out there with the expectation that I'm going to catch 1, 2, maybe 3 fish, and I'm going to be like, that was a great day. That was a successful day. I actually enjoy wintertime fishing a lot simply because there is not a lot of boat traffic out there. Once again, I fish from a kayak, and it's just great time for me to spend alone with God, say some prayers, reflect on things, just, take all the stress out of the day.
Nice.
If you do happen to have some type of sonar either on your boat or kayak, if you're not fishing from the shore, highly encourage you to go ahead and use that, because that will help out a lot in this. But I don't want my onshore fishermen to get discouraged. There's a lake not too far from my house, and I went walking over there and was just fishing from the shore, and sure enough, the other day I went and caught one using the Ned Rig. So you can catch the fish from the shore. Now I want to talk about body of water selection, because this is important. Sadly, if you are living in an area where you have really, really murky lakes and the vision in that lake is going to be very, very low, it's going to be a lot harder to use the Ned Rig, typically because Ned Rig is very much a fish by sight type rig. Not saying that it won't work. It's just the success rate goes up a lot more if it is a clearer lake. And I keep mentioning the word lake. Don't think this does not work in a pond. I've caught plenty of fish off a Ned Rig in small ponds as well. Now, hopefully you have a great body of water in mind that you want to go ahead and throw this in. When you are looking for areas in that body of water to go ahead and fish, make sure you pick out spots with, once again, like we talked about in the how bass operate during wintertime, look for a place with some type of structure to it. Submerged trees, rock piles, ledges, drop-offs, creek channels, things of that nature. Those are normally going to work best. But I have just randomly thrown it out there and just let it sit, and I've caught fish just throwing out in the middle of the lake before. So don't think it won't work. Those are just the best areas, those areas of structure, if you are looking for a very targeted place to throw. Once again, this is also great if you do have some type of electronics on your kayak or your boat if you are fishing that way. Next, let's talk about presentation techniques. And this is very, very important. You can have all the right stuff, but if you're not doing it the right way, then you're not going to catch a lot of fish. Number one, casting. Cast near structure. And when you are casting, make sure that there is enough slack line so that way that bait can naturally sink down to the bottom of that lake or pond, that body of water. Let it sink down naturally. And once it's there, let it sit. If you have a specific cadence that you want to use, typically I'll go ahead and count to 10 or 15, maybe even 20, depending on how cold it is and honestly just how my mood kind of is that day. You are going to need a lot of patience. Let it sit. Fight that urge to go ahead and immediately, as soon as it hits bottom, to go ahead and reel back in, give a big giant hop, things of that nature. Cast it near some structure, let it fall all the way down to the bottom, and let it sit there for a decent amount of time. Once your bait hits the bottom, it's okay every 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds or so. Once again, depending on the temperature, the colder it is, the slower you go. Give it a little bit of a very slight, and I mean slight hop. Give it a little crank of the reel, lift up the rod tip, things of that nature. Once again, think about you are mimicking a bait fish down on the bottom of that body of water. I cannot emphasize enough the words slow presentation. I've often heard some fishermen say, if you think you're going slow enough, you're not, and go slower.
Move it. Could you be any slower?
And lastly, when it comes to presentation, I'm going to re-emphasize enough, look at your line. You want to keep that line not tight because you don't want to make it look unnatural, but you want to have very little slack in the line. You want a little bit of slack, but not a lot. So that way you can go ahead and see those little ticks or the movement of that line if you are getting a bite. And that's going to move us on to our next topic, the hook set and reeling that fish in. For the hook set itself, you want to make sure that you are using a very gentle, sweeping hook set. Typically, I will just reel and pull up very, very slowly as I am setting that hook. You don't want to use a very giant, fast, sweeping, pull that thing up like you were fishing a jig bait in the summertime, because what you're going to do is if that bait is not all the way in the fish's mouth, it's going to go ahead and just pop on right out. Going back to the lethargic nature of bass in the wintertime is they are not going after things very aggressively. Oftentimes, they are going to very lightly pick up a bait, almost that you would kind of see sometimes during bed fishing a little bit, but well, maybe that's a bad example because they can get pretty aggressive. But they are going to lightly pick up the bait, sit there once again, maybe suck it in a little bit more, maybe all in once. And it's just going to be very, very light. And if you're trying to rip that lip as hard as you possibly can, that is going to pop on out of the fish's mouth. That's why a very, once again, slow sweeping and reeling in hook set is going to be best. Those finesse hooks on the Ned Rig are very, very sharp. So there should be no issue about that hook getting into that fish's mouth. All right, now that you have got the proper hook set in that fish, when it comes to reeling, you want to make sure that you are reeling in rather slowly. Remember, you are probably using lighter equipment. Like I said, typically a medium light to medium rod. That lethargic winter bass probably is not going to be fighting super, super hard. It may even feel like you're reeling up a log. Sometimes they can get a little feisty depending on where you live and what the water temperature is. But normally they're not going to put up a crazy giant fight, which is why you can get away with using lighter line and lighter equipment. With that being said, I do let the drag out a lot more than I would normally do in the summer, spring, or fall months. And that's in case there is a little bit of a fight with that lighter material. I can make sure that the line does not snap. And it's honestly a lot of fun when you fish with light material and you are fighting, a medium-sized fish into that boat or on the shore. So make sure your drag isn't set super, super tight. Make sure you leave some drag out there for when you start reeling that fish in, and adjust as necessary as you are reeling. Lastly, I want to emphasize that patience is key with this style of fishing.
Patience. Use the force. Think.
There is a reason why you don't see massive amounts of people out winter fishing, and that's either one, they're afraid of the cold, or two, there's just not that many fish to catch as opposed to the spring, summer, and fall months. You're going to spend a lot more time trying to look for spots and wait for a bite rather than actively fishing and pulling fish in and things of that nature. But no matter how frustrating it may get for you, have fun with it and just stick with it. It's so much more rewarding when you catch a nice size fish, or any fish really, but especially a nice size fish in the wintertime, even if it's the only fish you catch, because simply that wintertime, it's harder to catch fish, and you're going to appreciate it a lot more than you would maybe in those spring, summer, and fall months. I mean, I'll give you an example. Just the other day, I was out at a little pond not too far from my house within walking distance, and I sat there for about 3 hours before I ever even caught anything. I got like 2 bites prior to that, and then I finally caught my fish right I was about to pack up and go. That's the way it goes with winter fishing. Patience is going to be the best tool that you could ever have when it comes to winter fishing, even with a Ned Rig. Once again, I believe the Ned Rig is, in my opinion, just my experience, one of the best, if not the best, winter fishing rigs that you can possibly use. But maybe you have a different one out there. And if there is a specific rig that you love to use in the wintertime, by all means, drop it in the comments. Let us know. I am still learning every single day, even though I've been fishing for, the last, wow, since I was a little kid. But I'm learning every single day, and I learn a lot from you guys as well, and looking at different comments, whether it's on my videos or other people's videos. So please drop it in there. And let me know too if you got some disagreements. With all that being said, I hope y'all have a wonderful one and go out there and catch some winter bass.